Hello and welcome to the Miko Bits show, and I'm your host, Miko Bits, and today we have Chris from BadgerDAO. So we're very excited to hear about Fair Launch and about Badger, exciting project, and definitely high growth and very interesting. So, before we get into it, it's a opinion and information entertainment show. It's not intended to be investment advice. So, seek a licensed professional for that. So, I guess, without further ado, here's Chris. Hey, how are you?
Miko, what's up, buddy? How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Great to have you on the show. So, I guess the easiest, quickest first thing would be like, what is Badger DAO and how do you explain it to, my audience?
I'd explain Badger. So Badger is it's a business and we call it an open collective, but for the most part, it's a DAO that's focused on building the products and infrastructure to accelerate Bitcoin in decentralized finance. That's our absolute focus. And that includes not necessarily the applications once it gets onto other networks or where decentralized finance is taking place, but also the bridges to get it there.
Yeah, great. So, that's a big vision and scope, but I guess I would say like, what are your early tools and, what kind of things have you built so far?
Well, we launched December 3rd, so about 40 days ago in that range, 45 days ago. And we launched with our core product, which is called Set Vaults. And these vaults are yield aggregation vaults focused on tokenized Bitcoin. So users will deposit tokenized Bitcoin or tokenized Bitcoin liquidity provider tokens. We'll then put those tokens to work for them through a variety of different strategies. And these are all non-custodial and automated through our smart contracts. And that product today holds about $650 million worth of Bitcoin, or
Wow.
14 or 15,000 Bitcoins are in the app. And as part of users using that app, we actually distribute our governance token, which is Badger.
Yep.
And the purpose of the Badger token is to govern all products, including Set Vaults, but also the treasury. So anyone that holds that token can come onto our forum, participate in obviously in discussions and in votes. And then once it makes it to official votes, only token holders can actually vote and make decisions. So we are community first from the beginning, and that's our absolute intention. I definitely don't like calling myself a founder of sorts. So, we help get the ball rolling, and we're just helping shepherd it amongst, a massive community at this point of almost 7,000 people that are actively involved in different discussions.
That's amazing. That's pretty exciting. So tell me a bit about like how did this come to be? Like how did Badger come to pass?
Well, I've been in this space about 8 years, and
Yep.
I've been, primarily a passive investor, and I've helped a few different projects launch and helped organize different community events. I feel like Miko, you and I met in Malta when we were helping Iman with the Malta Summit a few
Yep.
years back.
Yep.
But nonetheless, going into the beginning of last year, end of 2019, I really wanted to change what I was spending my time on and focus on having a long-term impact on this space that obviously I've grown to love over the years. So what I ended up doing was thinking about how can we use Bitcoin as collateral more in this world of open finance and the future of finance.
Yeah.
And I explored a variety of things. And actually, one of the first ideas that I was exploring was a Bitcoin collateralized stablecoin, and then also how you can deposit Bitcoin against high volatility, almost like Bitcoin insurance, where you'd open up some type of put or call option on the other side automatically for the users to protect against certain downside or missing a big upside swing. And that's how it began. And I explored a variety of different options on the Bitcoin network early on. And, it quickly became apparent that building it there wasn't the best place to, build a product. And instead, obviously been involved in Ethereum for a long time. I then focused my attention around Ethereum and how we can build and accelerate there. And then, through that process, we really started to see this uprising of open collectives or DAOs that were able to bring products to market, have revenue and profit rather than, just kind of being a DAO for the sake of being a DAO. And then it's really started to click. And I got together with a few friends that also been in the space a while, and we decided to build Badger and make Badger from the get-go totally community owned. And that, spans across how we were launched, the lack of raising capital, putting product to market first. And then we also, launched at a pretty opportune time, because Bitcoin went from like 12,000 to 40,000 in the exact time that we were launching, and we were only accepting Bitcoins in our app. So it was like, a lot of fortuitous luck as well as part of it.
That's amazing. So tell me a bit about, so let's walk through step by step. So let's say I have some Bitcoins, right? So like, what happens? Like, how do I get involved? Like, financially, like, so I would send the Bitcoins to like your vault, right? So how does, who manages the vault, or how does that work? I mean, obviously there's an address that I send to, but like, what's the story with the address? Like, just want to understand the mechanics.
Yeah, sure. So it's all the app runs today completely on the Ethereum network, and we do not have the ability to accept Bitcoin, native Bitcoin.
Okay.
Right. So when I talk about Bitcoin, I'm talking about tokenized Bitcoin. So this is Bitcoin that's already living on the Ethereum network,
Yep.
which I'm sure you're familiar, but many are familiar as well, that's accelerated from, few $1 million worth to billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin that sits on Ethereum now being used in decentralized finance. But it needs to be there first. And this is where the app is today. And I can talk about where the app is going, of course. Okay, but nonetheless, today you need to have tokenized Bitcoin, and you would need to have been providing liquidity on different exchanges or different DeFi protocols like Curve or SushiSwap or Uniswap. And then you essentially come and deposit those tokens into a contract. Now, this is important, right? It's not a wallet. It's completely non-custodial. And it's not like you're giving it to someone on our team and then we go and do types of things. These are all coded into the smart contract, the smart contracts across, of course, all the different vaults and the different strategies that we have in place. But essentially, you come and you press deposit. Once you deposit it, it's then going to be running these strategies for you. And then every 2 hours, you're going to see Badger claimable in the application, because we're going to be distributing that Badger based on your share of the total pool that's available today.
Yep.
And that's really how it works.
That makes a ton of sense. So tell me about the strategies.
Well, there's a few different strategies. So I'll talk about majority of our capital today, about 475 million of it is in the comes from Curve LP tokens. And we accept a variety of different Curve LP tokens. You can deposit into Curve with TBTC, SBTC, Ren BTC, or WBTC, which are all different flavors of tokenized Bitcoin.
Yep.
And once you deposit into Curve, and this is what's important to understand. So if you go to Curve today and you deposit your tokenized Bitcoin into one of their liquidity pools, they give you an LP token back.
Yep.
And based on your share of the pool, you're going to be earning Curve, their native governance token, consistently.
Yep.
Right. But for you, you have to take that Curve. You have to take actions with that Curve. Do I hold that Curve? Do I lock that Curve in? Do I sell that Curve for WBTC and put it back into my LP position? And of course, with all the gas costs associated with Ethereum lately and, all that type of stuff, it becomes expensive and a lot of work. So what we essentially do on all of our Curve strategies is it's a compounding mechanism. So you deposit your LP tokens from us to us. Our contracts are earning your Curve on your behalf. And then frequently we're selling that Curve for the underlying asset of your pool, aka WBTC, Ren BTC, so forth and so on. And then we're depositing that back into your LP position. So in the end of the day, say you have your LP tokens with us for a month, we would have done that numerous times. When you pull out from us and then pull out from Curve, you're going to be getting more Bitcoin back than you put into Curve, because we were selling that Curve systematically and re-injecting it back into the LP position. So that's what we primarily do. Once again, all non-custodially across smart contracts, and these are all automated strategies.
That's exciting. That's
Hmm.
that's really cool and interesting. So yeah, so one of the things that we talked about a little bit before we got on the show was a kind of fair launch, right? So,
Hmm.
how do projects get financed, and what's the new what are the new trends? I'd love to hear, your perspectives.
Yeah, I'm like a diehard believer now in fair launch, right? Like it was probably Q1, early Q2 last year that it really started to click for me. And it all has to do with just the nuances of our industry and space. Like it's a really, really interesting space. This obviously wouldn't work in other industries today, at least, but I think eventually it will once we do have more of a network effect in some of those other
So
industries.
for the audience, maybe you can explain kind of in simple terms like fair launch versus anything else.
Sure. So for the most part, fair launches are when a team won't be raising traditional capital and they'll be putting the token into the market, or they're going to be launching a product into the market, all into the community's hands. And from that point on, it's truly a community owned initiative. And there isn't centralized control by the team. There isn't centralized control by different investment
And
groups.
no pre-mine.
There isn't, pardon?
And no pre-mine.
Yeah, and of course there's no pre-mine. So you're launching from this state of all right, it's square one. And a lot of people will talk about the ultimate fair launch was Bitcoin,
Sure.
right? Like that's many would argue that's the super most optimal fair launch ever, which I would agree with. But for the most part, that's really what fair launches are about. And then you accelerate into the market based on your ability to bring this community together, that ability for the community to make the right types of decisions together as a collective to push those products, that token, and that DAO, or even if you don't call it a DAO, that collective forward. And that's what fair launch is all about.
I like it. I mean, I would say that the DNA of fair launch really kind of comes from open source software and the open source software movement, right? Because the DNA, because the thing about open source, for example, is that one of the powers of open source is it, in a way, it's you could potentially even refer to it almost like as nonviolent. And what I mean by nonviolent is that one of the things that's been complex about proprietary software is that there's a control issue, right? So for example, let's say I'm working with you and my business produces software, right? So the thing that is potentially coercive is if I control the source code of the software that your business depends on, right? I can do anything, to you that I want, right? Which I think obviously people are scared of, right? So the idea of open source is the idea of kind of, I would call it self disarmament, right? You're basically saying, like, I'm giving this to everyone, to the whole world. And like, if you don't like my practices, you can actually just take it and leave, right? You can just go, right? And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, fair launch is something different, but in a sense, it has a similar quality of like self disarmament, right? It's not, you show up and you're like, I don't classify myself in a unique way. I'm just someone who knows a little bit about this project, and maybe I'm in a position to like be the most valuable part of the project, just like Satoshi, right? Where he's like, I'm kind of close to Bitcoin, I kind of understand it, I kind of wrote the white paper and the reference implementation, like you probably do want me to help with this, and if I
Mm-hmm.
want some Bitcoins, I'm gonna mine it myself, right? Which is what
Mm-hmm.
he did historically. So it's like,
Yeah, and you're spot on, Miko. Like open source is a massive part of this, right? Like, including Badger, everything we've done from day one, day zero is all open source. And it's about taking open source and not necessarily just applying it to the tech, but it's like open source, company, like at all spheres, like everything's open source. You know exactly how much is in the treasury. When things change and move, you have the ability to make those decisions together. And if it truly has that fair launch approach to which token holders are the only ones that can actually make these decisions, guess what? It's the community that's going to decide on day two, not the team that built it, right? Like that's the whole point of it. And it takes that open source from a technological perspective and really extends it to how communities operate in an open source fashion for everything that's part of it.
That's exciting. And what would you say are the main factors that attribute? Absolutely. So, a lot of projects launched during this window of Bitcoin run up, but not all of them quite so successful as Badger. So, how would you what would you attribute your success to?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, the success is really attested to the community. With something like this, if you don't attract the right people that have the shared values of the collective, it's next to impossible to really push that forward and operate any type of collective or business that generates revenue, that has sustainability, that can, find that product market fit continuously, not on, an existing product, but even on future products. And that was a big thing for us. So what we did with our launch, we actually, and I think we were one of the first to do this, but we actually took a large percentage of our supply, about 15% of the supply, and we went across 20 different DeFi protocols, and we collected information, collected data. Of course, everything's available on the blockchain, so we can do this. But we collected data from wallet addresses based on the actions that they took and how much so those would have aligned with our philosophies. So for example, the three key things that we looked at, one was use tokenized Bitcoin and DeFi, right? Like
Yep.
who's lent or borrowed tokenized Bitcoin already? Who's provided liquidity on all the major liquidity protocols in the space? Those people that did that told us immediately they understood the power of Bitcoin and decentralized finance. They already had tokenized Bitcoin. They knew how to use it. And there was a pain point for them because there really wasn't things to do with your tokenized Bitcoin once you've put them into some type of position. So you put them into Curve, you have an LP token, and that's really the extent of it. There's really nothing more to do with that LP token. Same with Uniswap, same with SushiSwap, same with a variety of other protocols. So that was the first thing that we collected data for. Second was those that were comfortable with and already participating in decentralized governance. So we went across a variety of protocols like Sushi and Wi-Fi and YAM and protocols like that. And we collected data around who has participated in voting and those addresses.
Yep.
And then finally, the last piece was anyone that supported public goods through Gitcoin. And that's a big philosophy and a big part of what we're all about here is empowering the future of open source as well.
Wonderful.
So that took us a long time to do, as you would imagine, collecting all that data. And it wasn't totally perfect. I'll be the first to admit it, but we tried our best. But at the same time, there was 32,000 people, 32,000 wallet addresses that we airdropped Badger to. And we said, hey, come claim this Badger in our app. Oh, by the way, this same app also will allow you to put their tokenized Bitcoin or your Badger to work. Here are the types of, APY and interest rates that you can get when you put them to work in our application. And that was really the big acceleration because it had the right users in the app and they took some type of action with that airdrop versus selling it. And then they immediately started seeing some return, getting, interest plus this Badger token. And that was what kicked things off the ground. So that was, I would say, a big part of it. And then, of course, the community, the right type of community was there to actually make all those decisions from this point.
That's very smart. That's a good idea.
And that was really, I would argue that's why we accelerated to what we were. And then, of course, we just so happened to find a really good product market fit. And we've accelerated to be, the top application to put your Bitcoin to work in the Ethereum space.
Yeah, that's truly amazing, and it's really great to hear, and it's exciting because you're using a very smart kind of techniques, and you're really focused on kind of who the active user base is, right? Because when you talk about like 32,000 users, like I'm not really deeply convinced that there are actually a lot more, right? I mean, I know there's people who just go to Uniswap and do this and that, but like I'm talking about like the real core of people who participate in governance, and the people who are really doing, all of the real decentralized finance. A lot of the people who do governance stuff are those are the real kind of organizers, creators, and the real community. So it's not a big number.
It's actually much smaller than, so that 32,000 is a bigger number than what actually is happening under the hood, right?
Yeah.
So when you look under the hood, like you have a lot of people doing onesie twosie types things, but you have, a very small, like I think, so here's some statistics. We had like 5 different tiers on, like, if someone earned less than 5 Badger, between 5 and 10, 10 and 100, 100 and 1,000, and then like I think 10,000 plus in that range of Badger. And the number subsequently got smaller, and of course, at the top there was 142 addresses that earned over 10,000. And the way that we did the airdrop was you would collectively get more Badger for every action that you did, but also the amount to which you participated versus the entire network. So it was proportional, right? So for people that were in that 142, you'd be like, they're the biggest players in each protocol. Like, there's such a small amount that are actually moving the largest amounts of money around, like exceptionally small. And then, even a step further than that, some additional data, like we've had 5,700 plus people use our app since we've launched. And the active users are somewhere between, I'd say, 1,000 and 2,000 a day in that range. So from that number, it's great, the conversion, like the amount of activity, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, it just also shows, like, 1,000 to 2,000 people are able to inject and manage almost $1 billion, which puts it into the category of, almost 10% of all 5% of all the capital that's inside of DeFi today.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this is fairly consistent with what you're seeing in other major protocols like compound finance. You're seeing it's effectively like a traditional power law distribution of wallet sizes, right? So, I think if you reason about kind of distribution, you definitely will encounter the natural power law distribution, and that gives you this kind of really steep curve, right? So it follows kind of the Pareto principle as well. So I think when you kind of eyeball the numbers that you're talking about, right, like you're talking about kind of 32,000 airdrops, 5,700 people, and then like maybe a few thousand, so you're really definitely zooming in towards that kind of Pareto principle, which is this kind of higher end kind of whale class. So that's something we've seen as an emergent property. So tell me a little bit about sort of what's next, right? So you have the vaults, and it sounded like you were talking about possibly doing your own, cross-chain Bitcoin, or what else do you have in mind? I think you describe Badger as a set of tools, so like there may be more coming, right?
Yeah, most certainly. We're like hyper focused on trying to bring as many innovative products specific to Bitcoin as collateral and open finance to the space. So, what's emerged is we're now trying to become kind of the one-stop shop app. And I didn't necessarily think about this when we were, really starting to ideate around Badger, but, it started to become that way just looking at users' needs and demands. Like, everything's super fragmented today. So if you wanted to take actual Bitcoin and turn it into tokenized Bitcoin, you need to go here. And then if you wanted to provide it as liquidity, you need to go there. Then if you wanted to earn interest on it, you need to take that and come here. And it's like, there's just so many different pieces. So we're consolidating that all into the app. So with the launch of our minting function, we're going to have the ability right in the app to go from native Bitcoin right into tokenized Bitcoin. And then we're going to be turning on an additional product, which we call like quick zaps or quick deposits and withdrawals, which essentially is a smart contract that does all the work for you. So you can take ETH, you press deposit into this vault on Badger, and it'll automatically take that ETH, turn it into tokenized Bitcoin, put it into Curve, put it into Badger, stake it, right? All within the smart contract.
It's like a Zapper Zap.
Doing anything. Yeah, we're actually collaborating with them on it. Like, they're the ones that actually built it with us, and it's going to be inside of the app.
Fantastic.
And then the third piece, which I'm super excited about, and I'm leaving one, I would even call it 1A or 0 for the last, because this is the 0. The product I'm going to mention last is actually the one that's coming up next, but a lot of people know about it. But the third product that I'm going to mention is the ability to borrow against your vault positions. This one I'm unbelievably excited about because, right now in DeFi, as I mentioned earlier, there's so little things to do with your tokenized Bitcoin. Once you make that decision, the road stops, right? So I have tokenized Bitcoin, I put it into Curve, maybe I'll put it into Badger, great. I put it into Uniswap, that's the end of that road. I put it into Sushi, that's the end of that road. I lend it on Compound, for the most part, that's the end of that road. And you really lose your ability to further leverage it, right? And today it kind of feels natural because there's so little tools. But when this space grows 100 times, all the tools we're using today are going to be the primitive tools. So there's going to be tools on top of that, on top of that, and on top of that. So that's what we're really hoping to do here, is become more of that primitive layer by opening up what I would call the value loop. So for example, you've taken your tokenized Bitcoin, you've put it into Curve and then deposited with Badger. Now we're saying use that vault position, which is essentially just Bitcoin under the hood, and use it as collateral to borrow a stable coin against it. Now with that stable coin, you can go and further participate in DeFi. And you could, of course, continue to use it within the Badger ecosystem, because we're going to have, a subsequent vault that you can put that stable coin to work in. And we will take automated strategies for you and increase the APY that you can earn on it. So that does a lot for the ecosystem as a whole. And then it also creates a much higher level of stickiness with this, 600 million, 700 million in Bitcoin that's inside of our application today. So that's, really what the next 2 months look like, Miko. And what's exciting about all those products is they're all community built products, right? Different community members and different DeFi protocols and companies, kind of came to us and we started chatting, and they're building it. It's going to be inside of our app. The BadgerDAO is going to have a percentage of that revenue and profit. They're going to have a percentage of that revenue and profit. And they're also going to be earning Badger a part of that, which they can then use to govern the product that they built with us moving forward, right? So it's really exciting to see how that takes off. And we'd love, the ideal world is we have all the best builders in the space. I want to do anything around Bitcoin and DeFi, working with Badger, right? Like that would be the be all end all. And I'll just say the last piece is our upcoming product. So our product that's coming next, that's got a lot of attention, is a product called DIGG, D-I-G-G.
Yeah.
And DIGG is the first synthetic rebasing Bitcoin. So it's a Bitcoin that lives on the Ethereum network and that uses elastic supply mechanics similar to that of Ampleforth to adjust the supply and try and maintain a target price of whatever Bitcoin is. And we're going to be launching that within the week. We've been talking about it quite extensively. And then we're going to have a variety of different vault strategies for it. We're going to be focused on some very unique things around composability. So how you can use this rebasing asset in DeFi protocols, in centralized crypto products, to which that doesn't exist today with most rebasing assets, because the rebasing mechanics prevent some of these protocols from implementing it. And then we're also going to be doing some really unique stabilizing mechanisms with how we distribute rewards, and then also with the active vault strategies.
Wow, that's a lot on your plate.
Yeah, and we launched V2 of the app today, which is exciting. So that's out in the wild. And
what's new in V2?
Well, V2 was a major front end overhaul across the board, not necessarily just from a UI UX perspective, but even the pipes underneath. And I would argue the way that we needed to shape V2 to not be focused just on the set vault product, which was what V1 was about, right? It was really built with really that product in mind and that product only. The infrastructure that we have now and the framework is for having a multitude of products living in the same ecosystem, optimizing for one another. And of course, there was a lot of community feedback around things we needed to simplify and how we needed to put mobile first. So those were the biggest changes. We spent a lot of time on mobile, and it's a drastic improvement from V1, especially on mobile, but also from performance. The ability to pull in different data hooks and web hooks across all of Web3 and all of the underlying infrastructure, and ensuring like it's a normal experience, right? Like V1 was slow, and like sometimes it would look a little funky and you'd have to refresh. And like my friends that aren't into crypto that were looking into it just because they knew I was getting it going,
Yeah.
they were just like, what the heck is this? Like this is an app, like people actually are using an app, like putting hundreds of millions of dollars into an app. Like I don't trust something that I have to refresh 3 times and wait a minute to see something load, right? And that's just part of having
That's
DeFi.
for like the $100 million degen trolls.
Yeah, right. Like we're all used to that because we get it, but normies aren't. Let's just call it that, the newbies. So V2
right.
is more geared towards making it friendly to everybody, building that trust immediately, high performance, mobile first.
Got it. That's great. I mean, you're kind of moving from the Chads out into the wider world. So, that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned sort of future expansion into doing effectively bridging, right? So if you talk about kind of direct deposit of unwrapped Bitcoin, like how would that mechanism work, especially kind of from the perspective of decentralization?
Well, today, with our launch of minting, so the ability to go from native Bitcoin into tokenized Bitcoin, we're going to be leveraging the Ren VM and what Ren's built. If you're familiar, Miko, or some of your people in the audience,
we had Ren on the show, so
wicked, yeah. So you get it, and I think the audience gets it.
Yep.
I would argue that's the best tool in the market today to enable the ability for other applications to allow for native swaps between Bitcoin and tokenized Bitcoin and back. But I think I think everyone would argue there's room for improvement across the board on all tokenized Bitcoin. I don't think we've gotten there yet. Well, not that I don't think. I know we haven't gotten there yet. I know that's going to grow exponentially. I've actually been pretty interested in this idea of community custodied Bitcoin to tokenized Bitcoin. Like in its simplest form, imagine there was an incentivization structure and decentralized governance structure, and you had people from all around the world that were responsible for custodying the Bitcoin that was being deposited into a boatload of different multi-sigs, for example.
Yeah.
And through those people and through that community and the governance structure, they're then able to manage and control that and then mint the equivalent.
You should check out Credo. They have kind of a MPC type of a cross-chain mechanism, and I think it describes a little bit about it's Credo with a Q. So I'll send you the link later. But it's definitely kind of advanced technology, right? I think Ren is obviously kind of the, I guess, state of the art and market leader. But I think the thing, obviously everyone looks at there is like the gray core, and they're looking at kind of the central dev control over. Yeah, they have 13 nodes, but like it's really still it's still the team, right? So like. The decentralization, and obviously what you're trying to do there is hard, and I think it's really early days. So I don't fault it at all. I'm just saying that like it's I think one of the things that DeFi has ushered in is a wave of kind of pragmatism. So I think that things like Oracle's, yeah, especially with staking and slashing, have just become kind of trustworthy enough, right? And people just assess them differently, right? They're no longer looking for kind of objective purity. They're just looking for like trustworthy enough, right? Each individual actor has to evaluate and say, well, is that good enough for my application? As opposed to like, is it provably and mathematically sound, which I think used to be the standard, and I think it's changed. But I
agree, Miko. I agree with you there, and I'll just add a point that it's it comes down to like, what can you actually do today without those applications, right? Even if they don't meet a certain standard around decentralization, the answer is you can't do anything, right? Like, so it's like it's this give or take. And then the same thing goes for people that are even looking at bringing Bitcoin into other networks, right? Like, I've had a lot of conversations with folks that are just like, hey, I'd rather give it to a centralized, custodian that, earns me 5 or 6% interest and trust these random smart contracts with these anonymous teams and make 50%. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, straight up, like
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
sure, if
That's
if
proven.
that's where your comfort level is,
Yep.
then of
People do that.
course,
Absolutely.
you
And
know,
different people are different too. So,
of course, just like anything, right?
yeah.
Like, why do you think there's people that buy just blue chip stocks and then people monkey around with penny stocks, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's so, totally different profiles, and we're just starting to see that there is no one way or the other, and that's one of the things that frustrates me a little bit about like the Bitcoin maximalism and some of the maximalism even in the Ethereum community. It's like we're one industry. It's everything so new. If you think about even when we were in 2017, there wasn't even any apps that you can do things with. Now, like, you can actually do different financially oriented things in applications, um, based on a permissionless blockchain. Like,
Yeah.
that stuff's crazy,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's
and
just
that's
like,
the pragmatism, and I definitely, it's definitely welcome. We've had a number of kind of Oracle players on, and we definitely appreciate it. We think that you just want to have it be ready, right? Like we had a Agoric on, a smart contracts expert, and he was basically saying that like 90% of worldwide commerce doesn't even take place with dumb contracts, right? Like, for example, if you go to a store and buy an orange with $1, right? Like, there's no contract. I mean, if you sign a Visa, if you buy it with a credit card, you sign a contract, but like, you don't sign a contract, you just buy the orange, right? And like, so they're basically saying that like, there's pragmatism in commerce, right? People just do stuff, right? Obviously, that's lubricated by trust, right? Like, it's basically like, oh, well, the more you can trust, the more easy and cheap it becomes to do things, like that, which are outside of this kind of hardened infrastructure, right? So I think that that's kind of where we're at. So I think that what's happening is that people are trusting this whole system more. They're trusting the actors more, and there's still occasional rug pulling in DeFi. Let's not,
a lot.
let's not
There's a
ignore
lot.
that.
There's a lot, right? And like, that's some of this stuff that's scary about what's to come. It's like we had an enormous amount of that in the summer.
Yeah.
Then the market took a big dip.
Yeah.
But after seeing what just happened in the fall, like, all the rats are going to come out of the woodworks now,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
that's probably going to lend itself to another big upswing, right? Like, everyone's talking about 2021 and 2022 and everything that could happen, both on the DeFi side, on the Bitcoin side, on institutional investment side. But as much as I do the type of people that come out of the woodworks when greed's
Oh
tough, right?
yeah, it's problematic. So and that's part of this kind of pendulum of trust and exploitation of trust. So let's talk about your meme game. I think that Badger has a really strong meme game. I think if you think about and I would say this, right? Like, just get confirmation. Like, the Badger you're referring to is a honey badger. Am I correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're all about Bitcoin, so of course.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I hold. This is what I say, right? Which is that there's a new spirit animal in the economy, right? And in a sense, talking about spirit animals is funny. It's funny. And the reason why I say go back to the roots of economics, and the concept of the spirit animal actually comes from John Maynard Keynes, right? So it's Keynesian, which is hilarious, right? Because all Bitcoiners are basically Austrians. Like, all Bitcoiners are basically like, screw Keynes, he's an idiot, right? But Keynes was the guy that invented the spirit animals, particularly the bull and the bear, right? Which are the kind of most famous animal spirits in the economy. And guess why he invented this stuff? This is great. This is super good. He couldn't explain basic price movements. Like, Keynesian economics is insufficient to explain price movements, right? So what he did is he invented these fictitious mythical concepts of the spirits, right? These animal spirits, right? The bull and the bear, right? And what I like to say is I like to say that that there's a third spirit animal in the economy, right? The third animal is the honey badger, right? So like, I just feel like you hit a really nice one there, because like, people who study the if you don't really know much about the honey badger, just like get on YouTube and search honey badger, and just, a lot of it's not Bitcoin, a lot of it's just the animal, right? Just watch this animal. Like, this is a super interesting creature.
And that's why it connects so closely with the spirit of Bitcoiners in general.
Yeah.
Is because it's the most unassuming yet fierce and relentless, and really nothing can kill it, right? It can get bitten by a rattlesnake, and then it can sit there being bit 100 times because its skin's so tough, and just kill it and eat it.
Yeah.
It fights lions. It does anything necessary. And it's this little dude, and it's amazing. And that's the exact reason why we chose honey. I've been obviously a fan of honey badgers for the longest time, just because of Bitcoin. But in general, that's what we felt, we needed. We needed a community of badgers, right? People that didn't take crap. They were willing to push the boundaries. They were willing to take shots and keep on going, and to spearhead what's going to be the new financial system moving forward.
Yeah, and you're wearing like a HODL t-shirt, right? So like, it's absolutely, that's, that is the thing that's so novel to me, right? Is that like people who are into technical analysis and stuff, they're always kind of talking about bulls and bears, and the thing that's so funny about this kind of central culture that emerged originally on Bitcoin Talk Forum and then subsequently across like a wider sphere, this HODL culture is absolutely a novel spirit animal, right? This whole thing of kind of buy the dip, HODL, like it's just raising the floor. Like the floor is just ratcheting up higher and higher and higher, right? And every time people buy the dip and HODL, like there's just a new floor price, right? And I think the people who are playing bulls and bears, like, bull markets and bear markets are they're for sure a thing. Like, it's very real. We're seeing it happen. We're seeing it play out. But I think that they're not necessarily aware that there's a third spirit animal in the market, right? Like I think that's the real...
you hit it on the head, Miko. Like a great example of it is a few weeks ago, whenever we crossed a certain threshold, I can't remember if it was like 18,000 or something like that. Essentially, anyone that ever purchased Bitcoin ever since it's been around is in the green.
That's right.
And it's like if you're in the green and you're now profitable from your purchase, the only reason you would be there is if you held and ignored the upswings and downswings, even if you purchased
all those
the
people
top in 2017.
That's right.
But to that point, like, look what happened from there. It then went up twice the amount. It's like you're totally right around putting that floor in place. And I can attest to it. I've been holding the original Bitcoin that I purchased 8 years ago. And for me, it's like I'm not good at trading. I've never been good at trading. Whenever I tried, I end up losing and kicking myself in the ass, saying, I wish I just did nothing and just sat there with the stuff that I believed in for the long term. And that's how it ends up usually being, right?
But it's so funny. It's so funny because when you go back to traditional finance, right, you go to Wall Street in New York, right, and you're going to see the bull, right? Like, and there's the statue. It's giant and it's very energetic. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, this is it. Like, this is the animal spirit that created centralized finance. Like, okay, I get it, right? And the thing that's so fascinating about this third animal spirit is that, like, it's very indifferent, right? So the thing that's so funny about what you're describing is you're describing this incredible power move, which is effectively like, I mean, the thing that people talk about when they talk about the honey badger is they talk about how it kind of just doesn't care. It just does whatever. And it's very indifferent. It's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm over here. I'm going over here. I'm going to get some of this. Or like, it just does what it does. It can't be bothered. Right. And so it's so funny because obviously there's a huge segment of like Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency movement that's very into things like trading and day trading and doing all that kind of stuff. Right. But like, in a sense, over time, that kind of day trading action is just taken over by bots, right? So you're really just being counter traded. Your behavioral economics are being counter traded by like, these machine algorithms, and you have these kind of super whale institutional investors whose primary goal is to make Bitcoin do what you thought it wasn't going to do. Right? Because that's how they get rich, right? If they can make it do something that you didn't think it was going to do, right? And the thing that's so beautiful about this third animal spirit is that, like, you don't have to do anything. You just hang out, maybe buy a dip every once in a while, right? Like, why not? right? Why not? So it's good. So I think you guys hit a really juicy meme there, and I think everyone's secretly rooting for the honey badger. So if anyone in the audience hasn't ever really studied this animal, like just enjoy yourself, go watch some videos. This thing is unstoppable. It's incredible.
Unbelievable.
It's a perfect spirit animal for this. Obviously it wasn't the Satoshi era, came later, but like some things just stick for a reason. HODL stuck for a reason. I think honey badger stuck for a reason. This is all like real stuff. I think that actually the origins, if you go back to the roots, it was not Satoshi era, but I believe it was a Eric Voorhees made a billboard with a honey badger for Bitcoin, and I think it was funded by Roger Ver. So I think that it does go back to OG Bitcoiners, not necessarily to Satoshi, but like it goes back a ways. It's a good meme.
Yeah, I think it's probably around 2012. I think in that range.
Yeah, which is that the Bitcoin was pretty inexpensive at the time relative to today. Mm-hmm. That was a good time to get into it if you're going to. And obviously there were plenty OGs, some of who we named. I mean, if you want to read, if audience members want to read about it, like check out like Bitcoin Billionaires. I think that's a pretty fun book, and there's a bunch
that book.
Yeah, it's fun, right? You can really get the spirit of the early days, which I think is pretty valuable. Well, this has been really exciting. Tell me a bit about like where your head's at these days with the, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Obviously, one of the beautiful things about what you're doing is you're honoring both, right? So, I guess, how do you see the market, and how do you see the cryptographic asset space?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the whole market follows Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's the king of the market.
Yeah.
And whatever happens with Bitcoin is going to dictate how the market moves and changes. Good example of that was in the summer. We saw Bitcoin relatively stagnant around 9 to 11,000, and then that gave an opportunity for applications like DeFi to really make their mark and accelerate along with Ethereum. But I think the narrative now is around institutional interest and how it relates to the overall changing dynamic of the world and the weakening dollar, and it's arguably the exact script anybody could have written for why Bitcoin would accelerate in the coming years, is because it solves all of those inherent problems, and it points to the need for a new open financial system, right? An alternative financial system. So I think that's starting to click for a lot of people. A lot of people on the institutional side, a lot of people on the retail side. While that's all happening, the pipes are then growing and growing. When you have places like PayPal hitting record months like they did in December or whatever it may be, and all these types of applications that are making it easy for anybody to acquire cryptocurrency and eventually use cryptocurrency. I think this is just the beginning of what we're going to see over the next couple of years, led by Bitcoin. And then I'm obviously a big proponent of decentralized finance, and I think Ethereum's right behind there, and DeFi applications, the primitive layers that power everything that's going to be sitting on top, are really going to be the stars of the show as well. And I think that's probably going to be the line in the sand of like, the Bitcoin and Ethereum conversations are most likely going to be around like that institutional level, right? It's still, where the DeFi is like for people that have been in the space a long time, that have desperately been building and trying to put real use to it, they're going to just be sucked into this, like, holy crap, I can actually do cool things with my crypto now.
Yeah.
But that's not like this. I don't think in this run, we're going to have that touch retail in any type of way. Even today, it's a great, like in some instances, to do trades on the most popular decentralized exchanges in the space built on Ethereum, it costs $50 to $100.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's like, that's not, like, that doesn't work, So I don't think we're going to see that push, but we're going to see a much bigger push on, like, that's quote unquote, like the crypto insiders, the power users that are going to be very actively building and participating in this.
But I do think 2021 is going to be the year of L2, right? Of layer 2, right? And I think that The thing that I'm really excited about is that I really feel like layer 2 is going to dramatically stabilize and dramatically kind of like improve the Ethereum experience. So I see a lot of people in DEX. I see a lot of people in gaming. I see a lot of people who are implementing layer 2, whether it be like Optimism or whether they be creating their own layer 2 solutions, right? But I think layer 2 is really going to blossom. And the thing I'm excited about is like, a lot of the application players in the market today don't have time to wait around for like ETH2, right? To ETH2 to even develop like a programming model and a VM and sharding and the whole thing, right? I mean, obviously phase 0, but like, we don't have time. Like we need the gas prices to come down. We need the performance to go up, and we're getting that. We're going to get that. Like, so L2, I think this is the year of layer 2. We're going to see a lot of layer 2, and I don't think layer 2 is just a way to make Ethereum more awesome, and so I think I'm happy for it.
And we're seeing it, right, Miko? Like Synthetics is getting ready to launch with Optimism this week, I think.
Absolutely.
Uniswap's working on that. We've talked to the folks at Starkware, like ZK is really making some moves on their L2 solutions.
It's exciting.
It's that in between, right? Like it's before ETH gets there. It's not going to get there in the next year or two.
No, it'll take a while.
The need is just massive, and that's also going to be a big accelerator for DeFi because the fact of the matter is like DeFi is the most or are the most used applications on permissionless blockchains in the world, and they have the immediate need for these types of in between L2 type solutions, and they're also like crazy cowboys that are willing to make it happen, right? So they're going to be the first to push it there, and we're going to be seeing some really exciting things this year around that. I completely agree. Along with sorry, I was just going to say along with and I don't want to just use this term for just throwing it out there, but NFTs in particular.
I have a lot of NFT stuff on my show.
Not necessarily, like I think about it a little differently. I don't necessarily think about it as like art. I think about it as like, a provable access. Yeah. So here's an example.
Permission.
Exactly. Permissioned access. So as an example, we did an NFT campaign with Meme about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I think cumulatively between all of our NFTs, they sold for anywhere between $300,000 or $400,000 worth. And it's not because the art's amazing. Let's call a spade a spade. There's two reasons, and they are really cool, but there's two reasons why they sold for that. One was because we incentivized the actual campaign by saying anyone that collects all 6 will be able to come to our app and unlock a honeypot that has 1 Bitcoin worth of Badger in there.
Amazing.
So people were trading and buying and collecting and mining and doing everything they can to get all 6. And there was like obviously a time crunch and competition and all that. Then it was like, okay, great. Then we said, hey, we're launching a new product. Anyone that participated in earning our NFTs or hold our NFTs, we're going to drop this new product, this new token dig on you. And then all of a sudden we saw another uptick and people wanted to participate. The next step is how do you use those to get special services or value in the apps that you like to use every day. So in the Badger world, we're going to be turning that type of stuff on where you'll get access to exclusive products, you get boosts in different interest rates, you'll have these special things that you get because you hold that. And that, in my opinion, is going to be a major, major driver this year and the collision between like those two things.
Yeah, I like that, and I'm excited to hear you describing all these new mechanisms. And I think you've got a really great cocktail like spinning in Badger, so that's really exciting to hear about. Yeah, I think on a closing note, like one of the tweets that came out this morning is Tyler Winklevoss, one of the Bitcoin billionaires, was tweeting about $1,000 Ether. Right. And he was like, oh my God, it's so cheap. Like he's obviously he's not just a Bitcoiner, like he's really excited about Ethereum as I think we all are. So, I think it's great. I like that you're, Badger kind of has this respect for like these two flagships, you know, and I do think that you know, Ether is a little underplayed. You know, I think it's short of all-time high. It needs to go. It needs to go to 2,000. You know, not
Yeah,
investment, not investment advice, but I think layer two is going to help a lot. Layer two is going to help really stabilize it, right? Because I think Ethereum has other networks, like, you know, people are talking about the launch of Definity. Like, there's a lot of pretty interesting, you know, new kind of performance chains, you know, Avalanche and all these kind of things kind of nipping at their heels. You know, but I really think that this year is going to be the year of Ethereum extension rather than replacement. It's, you know, it's Ethereum's not going anywhere.
I wouldn't even use the term nipping at their heels. It's not. They're not even in the same ballpark at all.
Very good, very
They're
good.
not even relatively close, right? Like all the applications with any meaningful use, none of them are transacting on other blockchains. You can point to gaming on Tron and some of these things, but in the end of the day, real value accrual is happening on applications built on Ethereum. And for the most part, those are all around decentralized finance. And I
Yeah.
think that is one of the biggest killer apps that we've seen to date. The killer app in 17 of being able to launch your own token, that was nothing. That was
Yeah.
that was baby food compared to what we're seeing now. And this gap, because like it's not trivial at all to move from Ethereum to another chain when you have billions of dollars and battle tested smart contracts that are potentially written in
Yep.
other types of code to
Agree.
another. Like none of these top 20 apps on Ethereum are even thinking about, oh, I'm going to go to this chain or this new chain's launching. Like Ethereum's been around 6 years.
Yeah.
Like that in itself is one of the biggest trusting things you could imagine. You know, so I think, and I'm not saying you think this way, I'm not saying certain people in the audience think, but if anyone believes that other chains are going to even be able to come close, and this even narrative of like ETH killer, that's like one of the craziest, dumbest narratives I've ever heard, coming from a person that actively has looked to and has tried to build on blockchains. Like there's nothing even close.
Yeah, and I think people grossly like underestimate the power of developer community and of tools, developer tools, you know, and so like
Interoperability,
it's,
right?
yeah, it's that's it. So, you know, I again, like, I totally agree, and I think ETH is the mothership if Bitcoin is the flagship. So, you know, I think we got a great couple assets there. Well, good. This has been super awesome. It's super enjoyable to catch up. It's been a while, and
Yeah.
you know, it's exciting to hear about, you know, this project and, you know, how it's going.
Well, Miko, I appreciate you having me on. Like you said, it was great to catch up. Always love chatting and talking about markets and everything that's going on, man.
Fantastic. Okay, catch you later.
Okay, talk soon.